Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Love Meets Literature. This is the start of a very exciting series of episodes. We're going to be doing a little countdown to Halloween. I'm your host, Rachel, and you can find me on Instagram at Paperbacks and Sketchbooks.
And I'm your other host, Joe, and you can find us at Love Meets Literature.
You can find us on every corner of the internet, so please do give us a follow. It will help us immensely. So Halloween is quickly approaching, which is shocking to me because I feel like just yesterday it was the start of summer.
Yeah, this back half of the year has flown by for me.
And it's rude because I feel like I have so many things I need to do in now a short amount of time.
Yeah, next thing you know, we're going to be getting ready for Thanksgiving and then Christmas shopping and then Christmas.
People are already asking me what I want for Christmas, and I'm like, can we get through Halloween first?
I feel like that's how it should be. At least get through Halloween and then we can talk about Christmas.
Like, I'm not ready to do my Christmas shopping before October is over. I'm not financially prepared for that just yet.
I don't even think I'm mentally prepared.
No, I don't even want to think about Christmas yet. It's still too hot outside. It's still yucky and humid and hot, and the sun is scorching my face whenever I step outside. And I need a real fall to happen, and I need it to stay consistent.
Yeah, it's that horrible time of the year when the sun is blisteringly hot. And so the second you step out, you just feel every single ray on you, and I can't stand it.
Especially between the hours of 3 and 5 p.m. It's the worst.
Yeah, they call it the golden hour, but
I hate the golden hour. I always have. I was never really into that. You know, everyone taking golden hour photos and posting them online. That was never my thing. I was like, I hate golden hour.
I'm just imagining that you're probably so hot when you're taking those pictures. It can't be comfortable.
Well, the sun's in your face. You're all squinty. It's not cute. No offense. Aside from that, we are going to be launching into a series of episodes giving you various Halloween-themed book recommendations just in time for spooky season. So today's episode is going to be some witchy reads. Our next episode is going to be vampire-themed books. And then our final episode that airs the Friday before Halloween is going to be some paranormal thrillers. And that will round out our spooky Halloween October-esque reads.
How exciting.
I'm very excited for it. I've been reading a lot of witchy books recently. I actually have read more than I thought I have, which was surprising to me because I didn't realize I liked witches so much, but I guess I do. They're kind of fascinating when you think about it. So I'm very excited to dive into this episode. But before we do, I have to know how your past reading week has been.
It has been positive.
That's good.
I have been reading, which is a little shocking. I know. I read more of The Witcher, and it's getting really good. Still my same complaints that I had previously, but if you ignore those parts, it's really good. There's finally some action and not just like build up to something, like actual story progressing action. So that's been really great. But that's about it. I haven't done anything else. What about you?
Well, I finished up Loves Music, Loves to Dance by Mary Higgins Clark. And it ended up being a 4.5-star read for me. It was really, really good. Basically, it was about this serial killer who strangled women that he met in personal ads, because this book does take place in the 90s. And he would lure them back to his house, and he would force them to dance. And obviously the women did not want to because they thought it was creepy and they were getting creepy vibes from him. So then he would end up killing them at some point and freezing them and burying them in his backyard. So very creepy serial killer. It kind of seemed like something that could be on an episode of Criminal Minds, which I absolutely loved. So the story follows Darcy, who is investigating the death of her friend Erin. And she's not doing it by herself. She's doing it alongside an FBI agent who has taken an interest in this serial killer because they noticed themselves on their VICAP system that there were a few too many similar deaths. So they did know that there was a serial killer out there, but they didn't know to the extent of what he was doing. So it kind of launched into that investigation as well. And in true Mary Higgins Clark fashion, she gave us so many red herrings, so many different points of view. It was just such a compelling read, and it was like one of the more interesting ones that I've read by her. I thought it was a unique concept, especially for a book being published in the 90s. So, I mean, it did have like old school references and stuff, but I thought it just like brought out the time period so well. And it's kind of refreshing to read a book that doesn't have so many technological references. Like everything was done through newspapers, and you had to hail a taxi cab on the street in New York. You couldn't just call up an Uber. So I like that part of her books. I like that they're older and they're just all around fun.
I do think when you're writing a police story or detective story of some kind, having it take place in a little bit of an older setting usually lends itself well.
Well, and they take place in older settings because that's like when she actually wrote them.
Well, still, I think it just happens to work out nicely for her.
Yeah, but can you just imagine, like, actually, let's say you are in like 1991, which I think is when this book was published, at least in the copy that I had, it said 1991. Imagine you're in 1991 and you're reading a book that takes place in 1991. It wouldn't feel any different to you.
That is true. I guess I never really thought about it from that perspective.
Yeah, so it's like kind of mind-blowing to think about.
Do you think people cringed at the things in the book like we do when we see like people reference Snapchat or something on there? Do you think they saw him take out like an ad in the newspaper and they're like, oh my gosh, that's so cringy?
Oh, maybe.
You know, that's kind of funny to think about.
They're like, oh, a book about personal ads.
Yeah, right. Oh, I hate that trope.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting to think about. The only thing that really kept me from giving it a full 5 stars was that sometimes the pacing was kind of off. So it would be like pretty slow and then it would like pick up speed and then it would be slow again. So I just wished the pacing was more consistent. But other than that, great story, perfect mood setting for the October Halloween season. So if you have not read a Mary Higgins Clark book yet, I recommend checking her out because she writes some really good suspense thrillers that keep you on the edge of your seats. She's the queen of suspense after all.
It does say it on the cover of the book.
It does. That might be a Simon & Schuster thing though, because they are reprinting her books in new paperback form.
Oh, so she's not, well, that's even a higher praise if she's not self-proclaimed.
Yeah, Mary Higgins Clark is unfortunately, rest in peace. She had a great run. She has so many books. I'm trying to work my way through her backlist, and I think it's going to take me my whole life to get through all her books.
I was going to say, I feel like you have read a ton of those.
I have read, I think, 4 of her books.
Really? It feels like way more than that.
No, it's only been 4. I don't have that many on my shelf. I'm trying to collect them all.
You know what it is? I get her and Karen Slaughter, for some reason in my head, they're the same person. I don't know why.
They are 2 very totally different people with totally different genres of books.
Something about it. I don't know why.
But Loves Music, Loves to Dance by Mary Higgins Clark. Very solid suspense thriller. So I think it's time for us to bring back our Wikipedia fun facts with a very fitting segment today about the origins of Halloween.
This was way more interesting than I thought it was going to be. And if you're looking for a very good Wikipedia article, I highly recommend the one on Halloween. It is incredibly long, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but I will touch on some of my favorite parts. So I got to talk about the etymology, how Halloween got the word Halloween. So it originally was called All Hallows Eve because All Hallows Day was the day after. And then eventually it became Hallows Eve, and then eventually it became Halloween. It literally means Saints' Evening or the eve of Saints Day because the day after is All Saints Day, in case you didn't know. Every single one of the traditions that you're familiar with, so trick-or-treating, costume parties, carving pumpkins, bonfires, games, pranks, everything basically comes from all the way back in the old school days. And I'm going way back old school over in Scotland and Ireland. They did like all of those things, and that's how we got all the traditions that we have today.
Interesting. I would not expect them to be that old.
Some of the different traditions actually date all the way back until like 731, 741 with Pope Gregory III.
My goodness.
Very, very old. And it's all really interesting. Back then, they actually carved turnips, but then when they came over to the Americas, they decided it was easier to carve and easier to find pumpkins. So they did that.
Can you imagine carving a turnip for Halloween instead of a pumpkin?
I know, right? Aren't they like way smaller? Like, I don't know how you would do that.
I think they're a decent size. I think you could carve a turnip because they're bigger than a beet, but they're like beet shaped, I think, or like radish shaped, something like that. But they're bigger. Like, I want to say they're like close to the size of a potato. So I guess it would be like you're carving a potato.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Which could be doable. But also, did they stick lights in them to make them like lanterns like we do now with jack-o'-lanterns?
Yes, they did do jack-o'-lanterns. And the reason for them is that they were supposed to be used to ward off the evil spirits. Because the whole point of, or I guess the traditions kind of turned Halloween to ringing of the church bells, and it was supposed to pull the souls from purgatory and all this kind of stuff. And so they would want to ward off the evil spirits while attracting the good ones. And part of that also involved how trick-or-treating came around, which is the town criers would go from house to house and they would collect soul cakes, which are some sort of treat. I'm not exactly sure what's in them, but they would collect those and then they would distribute them to the other less fortunate people. Sometimes they would eat them for themselves, all that kind of stuff. And that was believed to be the origin of trick-or-treating. So one of my favorite things from this article that I definitely want to talk about is the masks that they used to make. So they would dress up as scary things, and the idea was it was making fun of the scary things because, haha, you're not that scary. And the masks are just so silly and goofy, and they really just look like a very cliche cartoon version of a mask, and I thought it was very funny. The other best part about this article is it explains one of the biggest things on Halloween, which is pet costumes. And they mentioned that pet costumes were estimated at $480 million on Halloween for the year of 2018.
Wait, I knew that.
How did you know that?
I think I did something like a couple of years ago. Like I did my own kind of version of these facts on a radio station, and I think I talked about the pet costumes.
Do you happen to remember what the 3 most popular are?
I don't, but I remember like the dollar amount of like how much was purchased in pet costumes being like so exorbitant and just like how.
So for reference, in 2010, it was estimated at $200 million. So then 8 years later in 2018, it was estimated at $480 million. And the most popular costumes are the pumpkin, followed by the hot dog, and then the bumblebee.
That is very cute.
I know, right? Like, what a nice thing to be kind of remembered by in
but
terms of...
also, so many people are forcing their pets to dress up for Halloween.
That's true. That is very true. Halloween is very interesting. Like I said, every single one of these things, and I'm not even beginning to go into like games and activities, and they call them divination rituals, are telling one's future, or playing, those games like with the board where you all put your hands on it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people still do that.
Yeah, it apparently all originated back in the day. Even bobbing for apples was first seen in the 20th century, or no, 19th century, I'm sorry.
Does your article talk about witches on Halloween?
That's a good question. It talks about food. It talks about haunted attractions. It doesn't get into witches, unfortunately. There is a see also about witches.
Oh, that's going to be a whole other can of worms because witches are very complex.
That is true. I guess we'll have to save that one for another time.
Yes, we will. But I'm very excited to talk about witchy books because I have had this sort of like newfound obsession with reading books with witches as characters, because every author kind of has their own take on witches and their magic systems and how people see witches. Like in some books, witches are hated, in some books, witches are loved, in some books, witches are just normal, ordinary people walking the street, but they have magical powers. So there's like so many different types of interpretations.
That is true. I like that witches have always kind of felt normal in terms of trends. Like people will always kind of write about them or do TV shows on them or something. So it's always nice to see.
Yeah, they seem like one of the more versatile characters.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to write them into kind of any setting because in most cases, witches have been around forever.
They have been around forever. And I'm very excited to kick off our witchy book recommendations with Wayward by Amelia Hart. This is a historical fantasy novel, and I read this towards the beginning of the year, and it was very, very good. So we start off in 2019. Under cover of darkness, Kate flees London for ramshackle Wayward Cottage, inherited from a great-aunt she barely remembers. With its tumbling ivy and overgrown garden, the cottage is worlds away from the abusive partner who tormented Kate. But she begins to suspect that her great-aunt had a secret, one that lurks in the bones of the cottage, hidden ever since the witch hunts of the 17th century. And then we flash back to 1619. Altha is awaiting trial for the murder of a local farmer who was stampeded to death by his herd. As a girl, Altha's mother taught her their magic, a kind not rooted in spellcasting, but in a deep knowledge of the natural world. But unusual women have always been deemed dangerous, and as the evidence for witchcraft is set out against Altha, she knows it will take all of her powers to maintain her freedom. And then we flash forward a little bit to 1942, only like 300 years in the future. As World War II rages, Violet is trapped in her family's grand crumbling estate. Straitjacketed by societal convention, she longs for the robust education her brother receives, and for her mother, long deceased, who was rumored to have gone mad before her death. The only traces Violet has of her are a locket bearing the initial W and the word wayward scratched into the baseboard of her bedroom. So this book weaves together the stories of 3 extraordinary women across 5 centuries. And this is an enthralling novel of female resilience and the transformative power of the natural world. So in Wayward, witches use more natural abilities. They use nature for their spells and stuff. So there's a very unsettling theme of bugs in this book. There's a lot of bugs. It's like really gross.
Not a fan of that.
But the story was so good. I love that it followed 3 different generations of women in this family going all the way back to 1619. Like, that's wild.
Right. That's kind of exactly what I just said. Like, you can write them into any time and it just fits.
Like, you and I can have ancestors that are witches.
Spooky.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
It is freaky.
It's so crazy to think about. So this book, very unsettling with the bugs. The themes were super dark, which I was like oddly not expecting it to be super dark, even though I should have, because the cover of this book has a giant black crow on it. So I should have expected something like nasty and gross, but I didn't. I don't know why.
Yeah, usually the crow. I've also noticed like any kind of bird. For some reason, the book ends up being pretty dark.
Yeah, it does. So I really liked how we followed the 3 wayward women, but I do wish that this book had more backstory for each of them, because I found myself not really caring too much for them. I got them at the surface level. I knew Kate's story, fleeing her abusive partner. I knew Altha in the 1600s dealing with her magic and being assumed that she was crazy. And then the lady in 1942 who is Violet, and she's kind of experiencing the same thing. She's searching for the mystery of the waywards, what this W means or whatever that she sees. So I liked how they all intertwined, and I thought the story was told really well. The writing style is really good. It's easy to understand. There's a lot of emotion in the writing, and I just thought it was really good to see strong female characters as our main characters and how they overcame all these various traumas. So overall, I gave it 4 stars. I would highly recommend it to anyone who enjoys magical realism, historical fiction, and you like having a strong female character presence. Character-driven novel, great witchy October read. I really liked it.
Great start.
Yeah, fantastic start. When I think of witchy books, Wayward is one of the first ones that pops into my head.
It is it really does sound like the epitome of a good witch novel.
It is, because it follows 3 generations.
The first one up on my list is one that I've talked about a lot, but I've never actually talked about, which is the Witcher series.
Oh, I know that one. You only talk about it every single week.
Right, but I only ever talk about it on a surface level, so I figured I should give the opportunity to actually talk about it.
Yeah, is the Witcher actually a witch?
A little bit. So, the Witcher series, and I'm going to pronounce his name once and never again because it's very hard to say, Andrzej Sapkowski. It is a dark fantasy series. The Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, becomes the guardian of Ciri, surviving heiress of a bloody revolution and prophesized savior of the world. For over a century, humans, dwarves, gnomes, and elves have lived together in relative peace, but times have changed. The uneasy peace is over, and now the races are fighting once again. The only good elf, it seems, is a dead elf. Geralt of Rivia, the cunning assassin known as the Witcher, has been waiting for the birth of the prophesized child. This child has the power to change the world, for good or for evil. As the threat of war hangs over the land and the child is hunted for her extraordinary powers, it will become Geralt's responsibility to protect them all, and the Witcher never accepts defeat. So, the Witcher series is, like I mentioned, an incredibly dark fantasy, emphasis on the dark, and it does involve witches and all sorts of monsters and creatures, but they kind of go by a couple of different names. Typically in the Witcher series, they're referred to as sorceresses, but they also do use witch as more of kind of a derogatory term. It's more like you would say it to a friend jokingly, but if a stranger called you one, you would zap them.
Is it derogatory to them in the sense of when you learn about the Salem witch trials in school, people didn't want to be accused of being a witch because it had this horrible negative connotation?
Kind of, yeah. To Yennefer, who's one of the big characters in the story, she's an incredibly powerful sorceress, and she doesn't like the term witch because it makes her seem just like a kind of lowly herbal medicine, not actually practicing these incredibly powerful spells. But then you have some people like Triss, who's another sorceress, that gets called a witch and she doesn't really care. There's some hunting of these witches and wizards that goes on, and so that's kind of where it also comes from. They don't want to be called a witch because that's you hunt them, like you mentioned, kind of with the Salem trials. All that said, though, the Witcher is, technically speaking, a witch because he does use very simple, low-level spells.
Okay.
So it does count. It's a guy witch, which normally they're called wizards, but
yes, they are.
he's a witcher, someone who witches.
Is witching a verb now?
I guess so. For him it is. But this series is incredibly good. And for reference, the section that I read is actually from the first book in the series, which confusingly is book 3, which is The Blood of Elves. There's 2 books prior, which are technically short stories. They're technically short stories, and then it gets into the 5 main books. And then after the 5 main books, there's now another one called Season of Storms. So there's 8 in totality. And so far, especially the first 2, the short stories, are incredibly good. Blood of Elves, the third one, was very good. The Time of Contempt ended up being good at the end. Baptism of Fire, not so great. But The Tower of Swallows, what I'm on now. And so far, it's been pretty good.
Well, I hope it stays good.
Yes, me too.
Up next is a witchy read that I actually just added to my TBR today. It was a new add-on for the Book of the Month October picks, and I saw it and I was like, I'm not going to get it, but I'm definitely going to check it out at the library because it sounds so different and so good. It's called The Stone Witch of Florence by Anna Rash, and this is a historical fantasy. I feel like a lot of witch books are going to fall in the fantasy realm because witches, hello, fantasy.
Typically, yeah.
It is 1348. As the Black Plague ravages Italy, Ginevra di Gasparo is summoned to Florence after nearly a decade of lonely exile. Ginevra has a gift, harnessing the hidden powers of gemstones. She can heal the sick. But when word spread of her unusual abilities, she was condemned as a witch and banished. Now the same men who expelled Ginevra are begging for her return. Ginevra obliges, assuming the city's leaders are finally ready to accept her unorthodox cures amid a pandemic. But upon arrival, she must use her collection of jewels to track down a ruthless thief who is ransacking Florence's churches for priceless relics, the city's only hope for protection. If she succeeds, she'll be a recognized physician and never accused of witchcraft again. But as her investigation progresses, Ginevra discovers she's merely a pawn in a much larger scheme than the one she's been hired to solve. And the dangerous men behind this conspiracy won't think twice about killing a stone witch to get what they want. So obviously this sounds super interesting and I really, really, really want to read it, which made me almost unpause my Book of the Month subscription. But then I would have had to get one of the actual picks and then get this as an add-on. And I didn't want to do that. So I'm just going to wait until the library gets it in because I think this one does not release until the first week of October. Well, it will already be released after this is aired, but it releases the first week of October.
This one sounds super interesting. I love when a book does an interesting magic system, and it sounds like this has it, which is super cool.
Which again, the versatility of witches.
Right. One of them was bugs. Now it's stones.
Yeah, now it's stones, and I'm super excited. It takes place in the Middle Ages. I haven't read many books that take place in the Middle Ages. And I feel like the Middle Ages are kind of a time period that an author can kind of do a lot with, because while there are some known things about them, I feel like really all you have is a generalized idea of what the medieval times were, and then you can kind of make inferences on the world based on that.
Right. It's very easy to kind of anchor yourself somewhere and then expand on that rather than trying to live within constraints of a modern time or something like that.
Right. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating book.
Yeah, I'm tempted to read that one as well, to be honest with you. All right, my next one, before I read it out loud, I'd like to clarify. I picked this one out for you.
For me.
I thought you might like this one.
Oh, I do see it's a romantasy.
This one is called A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. Mariel Spark is prophesied to be the most powerful witch seen in centuries of the famed Spark family. But to the displeasure of her mother, she prefers baking to brewing potions and gardening to casting hexes. When a spell to summon flower goes very wrong, Mariel finds herself staring down a demon, one she inadvertently summoned for a soul bargain. Ozroth the Ruthless is a legend among demons, powerful and merciless. He drives hard bargains to collect mortal souls, but his reputation has suffered ever since a bargain went awry. If he can strike a bargain with Mariel, he will earn back his deadly reputation. Ozroth can't leave Mariel's side until they complete the bargain, which she refuses to do, but the witch is funny and curvy and disgustingly yet endearingly cheerful. Becoming awkward roommates quickly escalates when Mariel, terrified to confess that she inadvertently summoned a demon to her mother, blurts out that she's dating Ozroth. As Ozroth and Mariel struggle with their opposing goals and maintaining a fake relationship, real attraction blooms between them, but Ozroth has limited amount of time to strike the deal. And if Mariel gives up her soul, she'll lose all her emotions, including love, which only spells disaster for them both.
So is she gonna fall in love with a demon?
Probably. Also, in case you're curious, there is a collection of these books by the author. And allow me to read you the titles really quickly.
Do they have really clever titles?
So that was the first one that I read you, A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon. The second one is A Demon's Guide to Wooing a Witch. And number 3 is A Werewolf's Guide to Seducing a Vampire.
Interesting. I wonder if she's going to make a fourth one with a vampire doing something to a werewolf.
Maybe. It feels fitting.
It does feel fitting. Oh, I like that. I'll have to actually check that out for real.
It did, it seems cute. I'm going to be honest with you, I probably won't read it, but nothing against it. I think it's a fun idea. It's just not my cup of tea. So I figured I'd share that one in case someone wants a romantasy this Halloween.
I'd read it. I'll have to find it somewhere, but I'd read it. Up next, I've got The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling, and this is a romance. 9 years ago, Vivian Jones nursed her broken heart like any young witch would. Vodka, weepy music, bubble baths, and a curse on the horrible boyfriend. Sure, Vivi knows she shouldn't use her magic this way, but with only an orchard hayride-scented candle on hand, she isn't worried it will cause him anything more than a bad hair day or two. That is, until Rhys Penhallow, descendant of the town's ancestors, breaker of hearts, and annoyingly just as gorgeous as he always was, returns to Graves Glen, Georgia. What should be a quick trip to recharge the town's ley lines and make an appearance at the annual fall festival turns disastrously wrong. With one calamity after another striking Rhys, Vivi realizes her silly little ex-hex may not have been so harmless after all. Suddenly, Graves Glen is under attack from murderous wind-up toys, a really angry ghost, and a talking cat with some interesting things to say. Vivi and Rhys have to ignore their off-the-charts chemistry to work together to save the town and find a way to break the breakup curse before it's too late. So I read this a while ago, and I did give it 3 stars, but I'm still recommending this because I feel like there are a lot of people out there who would enjoy this type of story. It was very lighthearted and it was very fun. I just thought it was very average in terms of romance reads.
It does kind of remind me of like a Disney Channel movie, but not that that's a bad thing. It's just, like you said, very lighthearted, very easygoing.
It does have some spice, so I wouldn't.
Oh, okay, maybe not that far.
To a Disney Channel movie, maybe like a Lifetime movie.
I was just thinking Attack of the Killer, whatever it said, robots. That has, that's a lot of Disney energy. Not gonna lie.
So this book had a lot of ridiculous things happening, which is not always my cup of tea, especially in a romance, but it is witches, so like I kind of had to have some leeway with that. And it was a cute concept. Like, I thought it was cleverly done. Like, a breakup curse. I wish I could curse my ex-boyfriends.
Long as it's not your current ones.
I don't have any current ones.
It was a test, and you passed.
So I liked all the witchy references in this book, obviously. Some of the magic was a little confusing in terms of their magic system. Like, I'm just not a huge fan of when books incorporate the whole ley line thing. Like, it just goes right over my head. I'm like, what do you mean these lines have all your power in them? I don't understand. I don't get it.
I don't even think I know what ley line means.
It's like, if the ley lines are broken, your magic won't work. But if they're like intact, you have full power or whatever. I don't know. I never really understand it. In any book I read that mentions ley lines, I never understand it. I kind of just ignore it because I don't get it. Other than that, like, I think if you really enjoy second chance romances, witches, and magic, I think you'd like this book because it also did include some humor. It's more like a rom-com, witchy romance kind of thing. But yeah, if you like those things, I think this book is worth checking out.
Next up on my list is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. This is a horror thriller. When single mother Liv is commissioned to paint a mural in a 100-year-old lighthouse on a remote Scottish island, it's an opportunity to start over with her 3 daughters, Luna, Sapphire, and Clover. When 2 of her daughters go missing, she's frantic. She learns that the cave beneath the lighthouse was once a prison for women accused of witchcraft. The locals warn her about wildlings, supernatural beings who mimic human children, created by witches for revenge. Liv is told wildlings are dangerous and must be killed. 22 years later, Luna has been searching for her missing sisters and mother. When she receives a call about her youngest sister, Clover, she's initially ecstatic. Clover is the sister she remembers, except that she's still 7 years old, the age she was when she vanished. Luna is worried Clover is a wildling. Luna has few memories of her time on the island, but she'll have to return to find the truth of what happened to her family. But she doesn't yet realize just how much of the truth will change her.
That sounds actually kind of really creepy.
Yeah, this one, I read that and then I realized that it was a horror thriller and I was like, that actually could go some pretty dark ways. This very much feels like October to me.
Yeah, supernatural beings who mimic human children created by witches for revenge.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
That is so terrifying. I wonder what they can do. Like that part alone kind of makes me want to read it because I'm like, what do you mean they mimic human children? Like, what are these things?
Yeah, I can't even begin to think about it.
Like, what does a wildling look like? I assume if it can mimic a human child, it looks like a human child, but maybe it like ends up being like an evil human child. I don't know.
Probably, maybe it like, I don't know, bites your ankles or something.
Like a chihuahua.
But this one I thought was interesting because it's kind of a flip on a lot of the other ones we mentioned where the witches are very clearly the bad guy in the story for the most part, that we think or that we know so far, because they were the ones that made all the wildlings.
Right. Interesting concept.
And as far as I can tell, it doesn't really sound like there's any witches currently, but maybe that changes in the actual book. Not sure. That said, still sounds super interesting. And if you're looking for the more horror and thriller vibes, I would recommend this one.
It does sound pretty perfect for Halloween. Up next, I've got Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli, and this is a fantasy. On the night Rune's life changed forever, blood ran in the streets. Now, in the aftermath of a devastating revolution, witches have been diminished from powerful rulers to outcasts ruthlessly hunted due to their waning magic, and Rune must hide what she is. Spending her days pretending to be nothing more than a vapid young socialite, Rune spends her nights as the Crimson Moth, a witch vigilante who rescues her kind from being purged. When a rescue goes wrong, she decides to throw the witch hunters off her scent and gain the intel she desperately needs by courting the handsome Gideon Sharp, a notorious and unforgiving witch hunter loyal to the revolution, who she can't help but find herself falling for. Gideon loathes the decadence and superficiality Rune represents, but when he learns the Crimson Moth has been using Rune's merchant ships to smuggle renegade witches out of the Republic, he inserts himself into her social circles by pretending to court her right back. He soon realizes that beneath her beauty and shallow facade is someone fiercely intelligent and tender who feels like his perfect match. Except, what if she's the very villain he's been hunting? So I read this book last month and I absolutely loved it. 5 stars, hands down. I have The Ark of Rebel Witch, which is the sequel to this book, on my NetGalley shelf. And I cannot wait to read it. I just haven't gotten there yet. It publishes in 2025. So good. So good. So Heartless Hunter, I loved the setting of this book. The New Republic was a very simplistic fantasy setting, but I liked that. It put more of the focus on the magic and more of the focus on this deceitful love story that's happening. I don't always need like this big fancy setting in a fantasy book. Sometimes it makes it more confusing. So I'm glad that it was simplistic. So there was also a lot of backstory in this book. So we got to learn a lot about the witches and the witch hunters and like why people hate them and why they're being hunted now, which is super interesting. So it kind of like told me how the world operated without the author just straight up info dumping how the world operates. And of course, it's dual points of view. So we get a point of view from Gideon, who is the hunter, and a point of view from Rune, who is the hunted. And they had a very good connection. I really liked their scenes together when they were interacting together, even though it was deceitful on both sides, which ends up being hilarious because like as a reader, you're like, oh my God, she's conning him into courting her. And then you read his point of view and you're like, oh my God, he's conning her into courting him. And it's just like this whole thing. I mean, I guess you can consider that slight spoilers, but it does kind of say it in the synopsis. So
It literally said it in the
yeah,
synopsis.
okay. So I'm not worried about spoilers there. But I loved both characters, couldn't help but like them both, even when I shouldn't have liked them both. So I highly recommend if you enjoy fantasy and romance and witch hunting specifically. So great witchy recommendation. And this one, like, it includes witches, but I think it's interesting that it also includes the witch hunters because that was like a very real thing.
Right. I just always find it funny. I don't know why, but I feel like a lot of stories, whenever there's like a more hunter type person, I feel like the name Gideon always comes up.
Well, wasn't Gideon the name of a famous explorer?
Yes, I want to say. That sounds really familiar.
So that could make sense.
That might be where it comes from. All right, last up on my list. This one is called In the Company of Witches by Orly Wallace. For 400 years, the Warren witches have used their magic to quietly help the citizens of sleepy New England town Evanfall thrive. There's never been a problem they couldn't handle. But then Constance Graves, a local known for being argumentative and demanding, dies while staying at the bed and breakfast Bryn Warren maintains with her aunts. At first, it seems like an accident, but it soon becomes clear that there's something more sinister at work, and Aunt Nora is shaping up to be a prime suspect. There's nothing Bryn wants more than to prove Nora's innocence, and it hurts her to know that even 2 years ago, that might have been easier. Bryn, after all, is a witch of the dead, a witch who can commune with ghosts. Ghosts never remember much about their deaths, but Constance might remember something about her life that would help crack the case. But Bryn hasn't used her powers since her husband died, and isn't even sure if she still can. Bryn will just have to hope that her aunt's magic and her own investigative skills will lead to her answers, and maybe back to the gift she once thought herself ready to give up forever. This one was the last of my choices because I wanted there to be a somewhere in between from like lighthearted and horror, and I felt like this kind of fit nicely in there. This is a mystery. There's some heavy things going on, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be all about the gore. It seems like it's much more about the investigation. It almost gives me like a Murder, She Wrote kind of vibe to it. So that's hopefully a light-hearted pick, kind of, that still has some heavy elements.
I didn't know you pronounced aunt.
Yeah, it's the Chicagan in me.
No, it's not. No one says aunt. I say aunt.
I'm pretty sure, isn't that a Chicago accent? You say aunt?
I don't know. I mean, I grew up near Chicago, but I say aunt. I've always said aunt.
Yeah, but you're very particular about your pronunciations.
I mean, not really. I grew up with everyone around me saying aunt. Nobody said aunt.
I mean, everyone I was around said aunt.
I've never heard you once say it as aunt. Until now.
I definitely say aunt.
Not really, no.
I mean, like, I say like ant. There's an ant on the ground.
I know, but like in
A-N-T.
reference to the relative, you've said aunt. You've never said
Like my
aunt.
Aunt Julie.
Yeah, you say aunt. You don't say aunt.
I've definitely said aunt before.
I don't think so.
All right. Do you want me to reread the whole thing? That's how my brain said it. So that's what we went with.
That's so weird.
When
Tomato, tomato.
When I was younger, I used to say Allen instead of Allen.
Which is just so wrong.
I also say espresso and I say across instead of across.
Which is also wrong. But, we've crossed that bridge already.
Oh, nice one.
Oh, I didn't even realize. I made a pun.
Wow.
I'm the unintentional pun master.
Since we're going to talk about words that we say funny, I'm going to get you to say some. You say groceries instead of groceries.
Yeah, because there's no SH in there.
I know. I just think it's funny.
It's groceries.
You're literally the first person I'd ever met in my entire life that says groceries. Like, I swear your mom even says groceries, but I'm probably wrong.
No, yeah, you're wrong.
You also say hanger.
A hanger. It hangs your clothes.
You got a little emphasis on the G. That's what I always notice.
Well, yeah, because it's the way the word is pronounced. There's a G in there. Why would I not pronounce it?
I don't know. Every time you say it, it's like my ears perk up. Hanger.
I don't say the word that often.
I know. That's why I perk up. I'm like, is she saying it?
Okay, so aside from your weird pronunciation of aunt, I think this book sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's, like I said, lighthearted. Still got some heavier topics, it appears. I really hope, or it really feels like it's much more about the investigation itself, which is always cool, especially because it sounds like she's kind of dealing with her powers. Maybe she's going to use them, maybe she's not. So it's like an inner turmoil of a witch.
Maybe you'll have to read this one.
Maybe. It is a 2-book collection. There's 2 different ones.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we have quite the selection of witchy reads. Obviously, a lot of them are under the historical fantasy genre, but there are witchy reads out there that are not historical fantasies. You just kind of have to hunt for them. No pun intended.
I think that one was intended. I'm telling my witch friends.
I said it in my head, and then I was like, oh, that's a really good pun. So I'm very excited for next week, talking about some vampire reads. There are some good ones out there. I've only read a few. I haven't had my hand in a whole lot of vampire themed books, so I'm excited to see what there is out there for those.
Yeah, that'll be a new territory for me. I don't really think I've read a lot of books with vampires. I mean, besides The Witcher, but that's got like every goblin and ghoul you can think of.
All the different mystical creatures or whatever they are.
Yeah, you can literally buy I think it's called like a beast book or something like that, and it tells you all of the different monsters and stuff like that that's inside there.
Interesting. Well, what are you working on reading this week? I mean, I assume it's The Witcher. I just have to hear you say it again.
It is still The Witcher. The Tower of Swallows. That and Snapshot is still on my Kindle. It's still there. I looked at it the other day. I didn't read it, but I looked at it. I will get through that eventually. It literally is only 100 pages in total, so I will get through it. I've been feeling The Witcher, so I'm going to just keep riding that for now.
Yeah, I would just do that.
What are you reading this week?
I am reading Rain Returned by Katie Carradine, and it is book 1 of the Fell Serpent Chronicles. It is a young adult fantasy, and I'm enjoying it so far. It has a more complex world than I thought there would be, and it's a tad confusing, but I think if I just keep reading, I'll eventually understand, because I do want to know what happens with these characters. We're following our main character, Kyra, so far, who kind of has an inkling that she might be this, she might have this power that nobody's had in hundreds of years. So that part is really interesting. So I'm just going to keep pushing on and see how it goes.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I was gifted the 3 books in the series, so I figure I might as well give them a shot. And I mean, I'm about 70 pages into this book, so if I've made it that far, I must be liking it.
That's true. It's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah, but I really want to get to some other books this week. I have an arc that I need to read. It is a holiday themed one though, so I would have to interrupt my spooky reads to read a Christmas read. But I mean, it is what it is. I guess it literally publishes in October, so I should read it before it publishes. It doesn't always happen, but it's the world of ARCs, advanced copies. I try not to collect too many, but sometimes they just appear. They pop up in front of me, and I'm like, I guess I'll take you.
Are you sure you're not a witch over there summoning books?
Oh, geez. I mean, maybe I am, because sometimes they just show up on the porch and I'm like, ooh, what is this?
I see now. It's all coming together.
Yeah, the UPS lady's probably like, this girl orders a lot of books.
Yeah, I know she is. Every time she's like, yep, it's for her. It's for her. It's for her.
Well, I'm super excited for one of my Barnes & Noble pre-orders to come in. It should be coming in this week, When the Moon Hatched. I talked about it on one of our very first episodes, and I ordered the hardcover edition, and it has blue sprayed edges, and it looks really pretty, and I really want to do a reread before the second book comes out, which isn't until 2025, so I have time. But I'm looking forward to that book mail.
Yes, I do remember you talking about that one. You really liked that one.
I did really like it, and I feel like I need to do a reread anyway because I originally read it on my Kindle, and it's a big book. It's like 700 pages-ish.
Holy moly.
Yeah, so on a Kindle, it's harder to flip back and forth from the glossary of terms to where you are in the book. So if I have the physical copy, I can more easily do that. And I think I will enjoy it even more as a reread because of that.
That's fair. It's pretty hard to argue with being able to check your notes and stuff while you're reading. I'd love to have that kind of thing in a lot of fantasy books.
Yeah, it seems to be a new trend. More authors are including maps and glossaries and even character charts of like which character is which and who are they related to and whatnot. So I like that trend that's been happening lately.
I've always been a big fan of like maps in books. I don't know why. For a long time, people didn't like it, which I thought was weird, but I'm a big fan. I like that stuff.
I honestly don't even really look at the maps.
Really? I do all the time because they're always like, we're going to Schmiegelheimen, and I'm like, oh, I don't know where that is, so hold on, let me go check my notes.
I look at the map when I start reading the book, but I don't really flip back to it unless I'm really lost on where a place is in relation to the original place. But I mean, to me, it's just a setting. I don't need to know where I am.
I guess it does depend on the story you're reading, because when I read the first Law trilogy, I got incredibly lost on where they were supposed to be. Like, they were supposed to go on this ginormous journey, and while they're over here having that big journey, there's a bunch of other stuff happening over here. And then at one point I'm like, you guys definitely should be on top of each other right now with the way you've explained this based on what I know. But I can't remember if there was a map in that one, but I think I just ended up assuming that I was wrong, which I probably was. You know, the author wrote it, it was edited, all that kind of stuff. So, but still, I like to have a map so that way I can go, oh, wait, they're over here.
I mean, a lot of people really like maps. So I think I'm just in the minority with I'm indifferent to maps. They're cool to look at, but I don't really flip back and forth.
I will admit there's a lot of the times when I do just look at it and then I go, okay, because then they don't really like do a big change in scenery. Like ACOTAR did that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there wasn't a huge change in scenery, and the only one that did happen, you're just like, oh, they just like went right there.
Well, yeah, because in ACOTAR, I mean, Prithian, I feel like it's pretty straightforward to comprehend where they are in relation to the human realm, and just the various courts. Like they're all kind of just stacked on top of each other.
Well, yeah, that's true. I did fact check when she's like, the boats got lost going this way. I was like, did they? Would they have? I like looked at the map. I was like making sure.
The boats would have gotten lost.
That's true. Yeah, I looked at the map.
Yeah.
Mainly because I was like, what the heck is she talking about? And I was like, oh, right. I forgot. There's just all this water to the north or whatever it was.
Well, I'm excited to go read some witchy reads, witchy books, all things witches.
I'm excited to read The Witcher.
Okay, well, you've got me beat because the book I'm reading is not about witches right now. But I wish I was reading a witchy book.
You'll have to pick one of these up that we talked about.
I'll have to, even though I read most of mine already.
You can pick one of mine.
I could pick one of yours. Maybe I'll read the one that you said you picked just for me.
How sweet.
Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Maybe you'll pick up one of these witchy reads, get in the Halloween spirit. To me, life is always better when you just go over the top for all the holidays. I just feel like it makes it more fun.
I think you got to. Just really enjoy it. Buy the extra stuff. Put up some decorations. Just have a good time.
Yes, have a good time. Read a witchy book. We'll be back next week with some vampire books.
Ooh, spooky.
Yes, spooky it is. So enjoy your week, read a good book, and happy reading.